Hey guys, I just wanted to talk briefly about writing a conclusion. So, we've talked about writing the introduction to a paper, we've talked about writing the body paragraphs to a paper. But papers, any story, any paper, any kind of writing that you'll do generally has about 3 pieces to it, okay? And the first part is the introduction, where you introduce all of your major concepts, all of the things that you'll need throughout the paper, and kind of preview that information. The body paragraphs are where you get into like the meat of the story. And the conclusion is that last part of the paper, the last paragraph of the paper. That's where you wrap up any ideas that you bring up in the story. It reminds the reader of all of the points, and it makes your paper sound finished. So I mentioned the introduction here, guys, because when you have an introduction for a paper, there's generally this, and then the conclusion mirrors that introduction. You discuss all these main points in your introduction, and then you bring them back around and kind of do them in reverse, show them differently, reflect those same ideas in a different way during your conclusion. So, when you remind your readers of all of your points, you preview all of those points in the introduction, and you remind the reader of all those points in the conclusion. So the conclusion ties up any loose ends. It finishes any plot or character arcs if you're writing a narrative. It rephrases and mirrors the introduction, like we just talked about, and it gives any final thoughts or feelings that you have, any lessons you learned, any hopes and updates. So if in your narrative you go through and you say, and you kind of end with getting a puppy, or when you bring your puppy home for the first time or whatever, if that happened years ago, you might talk about any updates that have happened since then. And ever since that initial rough patch, now my dog does great, and she loves being with us, and she gets along with all our other pets, right? If it happened recently, you might say, and I hope that now that we've overcome this, we're not going to have these issues anymore. You kind of throw those hopes forward. If you learned a lesson in the story, it would also be good to reflect on that lesson, kind of carry out that theme. Introductions are important in that they ease a reader into what you're writing. Conclusions are important for a lot of the same reason. It's kind of the introduction in reverse, okay? You don't just stop. If reading is immersive, then you need to kind of come out of that slowly, in the same way that you wouldn't want to just jump it. If you're deep underwater and diving really deep, you wouldn't want to immediately pop right up to the surface and move forward. You want to kind of take it slow and ease your way out. Reading kind of mirrors the same thing. You don't want to just jump out of it. You want to go slowly and kind of work your way out of the story and bring your reader back to reality. So, I've got kind of an example here for you guys, okay? We were modeling a paper about changes that I've seen in my life since COVID happened, and things that COVID has made me aware of, things that are different because of COVID-19. I talked in my introduction video about being hard of hearing, and the fact that I'm more aware of that now because of COVID-19, because of a scenario where I was in a coffee shop and I had this kind of odd interaction with the barista there. So this is kind of bringing me out of this and how I might close up those thoughts. When I walked out of the claustrophobic warmth of the cafe and into the slight spring chill, I was a vortex of swirling emotions. I was embarrassed and grateful in equal measure. I have been put on the spot in many ways. The COVID-19 pandemic has made me more aware of my hearing, because, while not profound, moments like this show how my hearing loss affects my life every day, right? I kind of stopped with any lessons that I learned. I talked about what I had learned. I finished up any loose ends. I kind of finished any plot or character arcs. I gave those kind of final thoughts and feelings. I talked a lot about how I was feeling in the moment, and then kind of how that had affected me overall. So, this was just kind of a little introduction into conclusions, if you will. So, again, conclusion, last paragraph or so of the paper. It wraps up your ideas. It reminds the reader of all points that you dealt with. It mirrors the introduction. and it makes your paper sound finished and kind of eases the reader out of the story. Whether that story is fiction or nonfiction or an informational paper, you still need to kind of ease your reader out. So this was just some thoughts on conclusions. Hope it helped, and have a wonderful day.